Yeah? Are you excited for the talk? Perfect. Let's do it then. I'm also super excited to be here at the first time in front of you as a speaker. And then today we're going to talk about how to integrate all these different types of LLMs into your Laravel apps seamlessly. But before we do that, let me introduce myself. I am Pushpak, and I am a full-stack software engineer. I came from a city called Dhule, which is in Maharashtra, and it's a very small city. So I'm super excited to be here, and you can find me on internet by this username called Pushpak1300. So without doing delay, let's jump right into the topic. LLM, right? It's a pretty hot topic right nowadays. LLM has pretty much changed everything in last 3 years. How we interact with different softwares, how we build softwares, right? Sorry. Let's suppose a scenario when your boss or client comes to you and tells you to integrate different types of LLM features into your apps. You kind of pretty much get excited to build those functionality yourself. But then you start looking at different AI providers such as OpenAI, Anthropic, DeepSeek, Ollama, and all. And then you pretty much started to feel that excitement going away, right? And that's where Prism actually comes in. So all these different providers has a different way to interact with, like they have different APIs, different parameters, and all sort of things. And then you start picture a code base where you start to build this integrations yourself, and then you kind of goes into a rabbit hole where you have to keep support every new features whenever comes out by this different API integrations. And that's pretty stressful. That's pretty stressful to actually integrate this and maintain this yourself. And that's actually where the Prism comes into the picture. So Prism is a Laravel app actually created to seamlessly integrate all this AI functionality yourself. So Prism gives you a unified interface by which you can actually talk with all these different LLM providers. So consider Prism such as Laravel Cache or a storage facade. So using Laravel Cache, you can actually interact with different cache providers such as meme cache, Redis, database, file, right? So using Prism, you can also integrate with a lot of different AI providers with a very simple and intuitive API. So Prism is actually created by this guy called TJ Miller. But he's not a real TJ Miller though. So this is a real picture of the TJ Miller. And so let's jump right into the Prism and let's see different features of Prism first. So as usual, the Prism is a very, gives you a very nice unified API using which you can actually interact with different LLM providers. Then Prism out of the box comes with a tool call, or many people call it a function calling support, using which you can actually build a very nice and very agentic AI applications. Then recently Prism also released a streaming support, using which you can real-time stream the output generated by the LLM to your front end. So you can build a very highly effective user experience apps. Prism also supports multimodal capabilities such as images and documents. So if in order to work with different LLM providers, right, you can pass your images, documents, and everything to the Prism, and then Prism will take care of sending this to the LLM providers. And then at the end, Prism also supports structured output, which is one of my favorite features. By using structured output, you can actually define how to get the response in a specific structure from these different types of LLMs. So let's look at all the code samples which I have prepared for you to show how easy to start setting up the Prism into your Laravel apps. So let's look at the first text generation thing. So all these LLMs are pretty much good at generating the text. They let you generate, they lets you build all types of applications such as chatbots, all different types of AI powered apps, right? So text generation is a kind of basic functionality where you, if you are using LLM, you have to use that as a base. So Prism gives you a very nice unified interface. Let's look at the interface first. So the syntax for Prism looks like very simple, where you call a Prism facade and then you call a text method on that Prism facade, and then you mention the provider and the model you want to use. Here I'm using OpenAI and GPT-4o model. And then you can just mention the prompt, In this case, I'm passing the prompt as tell me about Laracon India. And then you just call a generate method. So behind the scenes, Prism will actually send the API request to OpenAI with all the parameters and everything authentication it required, and then get that response and then transform that response in very nice unified manner so that you can easily work with all these responses very easily. And then when you run this code, right, you get a Prism response, and then you gonna print the text property on that response. You're gonna get the output something like this, which is poem generated by the LLM itself. Again, output of different LLM depends on which LLM you use, but that's pretty much the idea, right? How easy to start using all these different LLMs using the Laravel apps. Using these 4 lines, you can actually integrate a lot many things. So now let's look at another feature, which is streaming output, which recently released in Prism. So it's a kind of way to enhance the text generation of these different LLMs. So using streaming output, you can actually stream the moment it started generating the response to your front end or anywhere you are consuming your APIs, basically. So using streaming output, you can actually build a very nice UI experience for your user. So user doesn't even have to wait for a longer time to get entire response generated in the first time. So let's look at the code snippet. So this is using a recently released Laravel event stream response method, using which you can actually set up a stream to the front end. Now here, instead of calling the text method, I'm calling a stream method, and I'm passing the provider and the model which we wanted to use. And then the same thing, I'm passing the prompt and generating the output. So instead, this time Prism, what exactly will does behind the scene is, it's gonna set up the stream with the LLM provider, and gonna get that stream, set up the stream with the Laravel event stream, and then in the front end, you just have to listen to that stream and then show the output to the user. It's that easy. In 4 lines, you get a streaming support right out of the box in Laravel itself. So when you're gonna run this code, right, the stream-wise, the moment LLM generates any of this code, right, it's gonna show to you on the front end itself. So whenever the first line is gonna generate it real time, it's gonna send to your front end, and you can show that. And same thing will happen for the entire response. So your user doesn't have to wait for the entire response to be generated. They can just start seeing output the moment it's generated. So now let's look at another functionality of Prism, which is a structured output. Structured output lets you define a schema on which how you want to get the response from the LLMs to be generated. So all these different LLMs has a different way to handle this structured output. So Prism actually takes that responsibility from you, and in order to help you and make a better developer experience, it provides you a very nice syntax using which you can define a schema. Again, this is a syntax for defining a schema in a Prism. Here, let's suppose if I'm creating an application where we get a movie reviews, and we want to get a structured title, rating, and summary from that movie review to be classified. So here I'm gonna use string schema to mention the Prism that this is a string, and number to mention this is the rating should be the number. And you can also extend this for the Boolean, nullable, array, all this, and using all of this, you can actually create a very nicely, very complicated object schema which you can actually work with, and it's very easy to set up all this entire syntax. You can also mention the required fields in order to make sure that your schema is very much strict and the type, so that you get a predictable output from the LLM always. To use this schema, right, instead of text method, you have to use the structured method. And then you just same way define a provider which you want to use. And then with schema method, you can pass the schema which I showed you in the first slide, right? You can pass the same schema in this with schema method, and then the same way you just pass the prompt, or in this case, you have to pass the review added by the user, right? And then you just call the generate method. So when this happens, right, some of the provider doesn't support structured output behind the scenes, but as a Prism, right, we have actually created an adapted support for you in order to make that work. So whenever some provider doesn't have a structured output inbuilt supported, right, Prism behind the scenes actually add there is a way you can actually get a structured data. You just prompt extra that I want a response that in a JSON format with this schema type. And then we're gonna run the code, right? Instead of generating a text this time, it's gonna generate the JSON. And then as a user, if you are not using Prism, you have to pass this JSON, then make sure that everything is validated. But if you are using Prism, Prism will actually validate the entire thing for you. So in this case, you can also access the individual property, what we defined in the schema itself. So in this case, you can access the title, rating, summary, just as a very simple array syntax. Now let's look at a next topic, which is a tool calling. Tool calling is a very powerful way by using which you can actually extend the AI functionalities. Using tool calling, you can actually give your AI many superpowers. So let's gonna see how exactly tool calling works though. So LLMs are pretty much trained on a basic data, past data, so they don't have any real-time information. So if you ask any real-time question to the LLM, such as what's the weather in Ahmedabad, right? They can't actually answer that. So in order to extend that functionality to LLMs, right? You create functions which AI can execute, and that is nothing but the tools, right? And there are different ways in different providers handle this tool calling functionalities. So Prism also gives you a way to define all these tools as a syntax, very nice way and very fluent API. So you define the name of the tool. You also define a description for that tool, and then you also define the parameters which you require in order to execute that tool. So tool is nothing but a function at the end of the day. So what are the parameters you passed into the function? You have to define that into this API, and then you just get that from LLM itself. So in this case, whenever AI is gonna call this weather tool, right? We're gonna execute this function which are passing in the using method. In the real world, you will be like doing all this API call and then gonna get the real world API from real world weather in real time weather from all these APIs, and you're gonna pass this response back to the LLM. Here I am just hard coding just to show you how exactly this works. Whether in this city, whatever the city name is gonna come, it's just gonna show that it's sunny and 35 degrees Celsius. So let's see behind the scenes how this tool calling works actually. So when user asks something real time, right, which LLM doesn't have response, but if LLM understand if they have a tool which they can tell, so whenever, let's suppose if someone asks how's the weather in Ahmedabad, LLM is gonna send that response that I don't have this information, but I can actually call this tool to get this real-time information. This is like a very basic example of tool calling. You can actually create much complex stuff using this tool calling though. So in this case, LLM will send us response back that I want to execute the weather tool with the city parameter called Ahmedabad. And then this is just gonna send the response back to us. But as a developer, we have to decide if we want to execute that tool and do some action on it. So if you are not using Prism, you have to actually execute that tool call with the parameter provided by the AI, and then again send back that response to the LLM API. So in this case, Prism, if you are using Prism, Prism will actually do this entire step for you without doing anything. So it's gonna execute the weather tool with a parameter provided from the LLM, and gonna execute that and return that response back to the LLM again. So now LLM actually has the context of what exactly is the weather in Ahmedabad. So in this case now, whenever LLM gets the context of what exactly is happening now, and we ask the question again, they can easily answer that information. And now whenever LLM can actually send that response back to the user that weather in this city is this. So to syntax looks like this, where you call a text method, you mention the provider, OpenAI and GPT-4o, and then you mention the prompt like how's the weather in Ahmedabad. There are only 2 extra steps you have to do in order to integrate all these tools. So first thing is you have to define a tool, which we saw in the first step, and then you just have to pass that tool into as an array in this with tools method. Once you do that, you also have to done extra step, which is a max step, where you can define how many times this interaction should happen to avoid an infinite loop. So behind the scene, Prism will actually send the response to the send the API request to LLM. Then response is sent back to the Prism that I required this tool calls to be executed. And when Prism gets this response, Prism is going to execute that function which you have passed in the first slide, right? and then send the result of that response back to LLM again. So this becomes like kind of a while loop kind of thing. This interaction will go on until that LLM thinks that this is enough and I can answer the question now. So all these things, if you are not using Prism, you have to take care. But if you are using Prism, Prism will take care for you. You just have to mention max steps so you don't end up getting into infinite loop and use all the tokens you have. And then when you call a generate method, you can get the same this response from the LLM. And using this, you can actually build a lot of complex and very much agentic stuff using tool calls. And it's very powerful. Also, the syntax which I shown in the first slide, it was a minimal syntax. So if you are using very basic functions, then you can actually use that syntax. But if you are using a very complex tool setup where you want to do a lot of things, you want to fetch some data from the database and do some complex stuff, you can also define a class-based tools as well, where Prism, you can see that in the docs, by the way. And you might be wondering, we have shown a lot of stuff till now. That's the only thing Prism takes care for you? Actually, no. There are a lot of things which I am not going to cover in this talks, but which are equally important in the, which actually Prism takes care for you. So let's look at them one by one. So Prism also has a very nice Laravel testing support. So Prism actually provides you a very nice testing support using which you can fake all the responses by the LLM. You can test your tool calls and everything very easily. And believe me, guys, if you are using LLM application, testing everything actually makes sense a lot, because anytime you get any unpredictable response back from the LLM, your app can literally collide. So there is also one thing which Ashish talked about in yesterday's talk with LLM, where how exactly the embedding works, right? Prism also takes care of generating the embedding from these different LLM providers. Prism currently doesn't dictate how you store those embeddings in whichever database or how do you retrieve those embeddings right now at the moment, but only the generation part of embedding is taken care by the Prism at this point. So another feature which Prism also handles very well is handling the top level exceptions and the rate limit stuff. So all these different AI providers has different way how they can actually handle rate limits, how they handle different types of errors. So let's say some AI provider will say send 429 status response if they hit a rate limit. Some provider will just say send 401. So as a developer, you need a very nice unified way by which you can actually handle this type of stuff. So Prism actually give you a high level exception using which you can listen to all these exceptions and then handle the fallbacks and everything very easily into your application. Apart from that, Prism has a very nice docs which has been always updated every single time we push any new feature to the library. Also, apart from this, if you are wondering if you are using any LLM which are not very popular, LLM providers which are not very popular or something like that, you can always extend the Prism capabilities into your own by extending the interface and then creating a class out of it, and then you can just start using Prism for your custom LLM as well. And that's it for my talk though. But before I end my talk, you have to scan this QR code and give a star if you like the talk and you like if you're gonna integrate Prism into your Laravel apps. And that's it for my talk. I really want to thanks. Yeah, thank you so much. You have been a wonderful audience, guys. Yeah, I can see now everyone, so thank you.
Yep, how was it?
Yeah, nice.
You liked it, you enjoyed it?
Bilkul.
So a lot of people have asked different questions.
Oh.
Do we have gift? Yeah, may just give me one moment. So more than 30 people have asked questions of different types. Where is Ajay Patel? Do we have Ajay Patel here? Yeah, you can come here.
Yeah.
So his question is like, can we integrate a local LLM into a PHP based RAG system using Prism? And he is also curious to know about setups using PHP Prism, FIS, ChromaDB, and llama.cpp.
Yeah, so Prism actually does not dictate how you store all these RAG embeddings at the moment, but you can actually use Prism to generate those embeddings from different LLM providers. So if you are using any open source such as Ollama embeddings model, you can actually use Prism to generate those embeddings, store those embeddings, the way you want. So currently the database side of thing is not being taken care by the Prism itself.
Okay, perfect. And one more thing, like you have been speaking to multiple meetups and then finally you are on stage. So can you share an experience? How does it feel, or how to be on bigger stage you also need to prepare in advance so that one day you can be part of Laracon also?
Yeah, sure. So from last 3 years, I've been going to a lot of different city local meetups and speaking there about different topics so far. And coming here was always a dream. Like I applied every single time and got rejected, but this time I got a call from organizer, and I really want to thanks to all you doing great work so far. And it's being pretty excited and nervous at the same time though. And I have to prepare a lot though. Again, this meetup, again this talk which I have given at before local meetups as well, and then I'm giving here for the first time in front of this much big audience. It's always special. So yeah, thank you so much, guys.
The most memorable day of your life begins now.